Now, our next session is the Strategic Outlook and Member Forum. I invite back Jennifer.
Thanks so much, Lina. You want to take this too? They need to read my cue. Just slight reshuffling of technical difficulties. I know so many of you are going out to sessions. Please do. Those of you who maybe are sitting towards the back, we'd love for you to come forward as we talk through some of the pieces. If you wanted to go take,
Yes.
You remembered you wanted to take it is hard talking to you guys for so long that it is a joy to tag team this a little bit because it means that we can stop and have some water. So that's what Lina's going to do while I do some introductions of some work that we've been doing. So again, thank you all for coming back in this morning. And for those of you that are heading out, I know that you're going to see these in your emails and at other points. So I'm looking forward to you all continuing to give feedback for that. The primary rationale for pulling this session together and the meeting schedule was so that we could talk about the governance upgrade. As a member, you likely received an email that looked like this in your inbox a couple of weeks ago. And we've received comments already. Some of you are early go-getters, which is really fantastic. Some of these comments are supportive. Some of them are a little less so. And some are folks who have general questions. And here's the one that I'm getting the most. Why? Why? And you might be wondering this. Why after running ESA essentially pretty much the same, why are we doing this now? We've had a governing board that's looked this way for a long time. Why is this a thing to be trying to do? Well, how many of you were here last year, right when I got to do what Lina just did and welcome you as president? There's a few. Thank you to my partner. I see him raise his hand. But if you were here then, or if you were here on Sunday night, you might remember that I talked to us about homeostasis and allostasis and highlighted for you that while homeostasis is the act of moving from or being pushed off of our equilibrium and then trying to get back to where we were, allostasis is adapting to what our new equilibrium is. And that is an area that I had thought was really a better biological concept to talk about what we've been going through from the pandemic and for so many changes that we've been encountering recently. So I bring this up because for the most part, we are past the pandemic years. And while our society, our organization got through the pandemic fine, there is no denying that we were impacted by it. There were financial stressors, there were programmatic stressors, and frankly, we discovered that there are some better operational modes than we had previously used. In other words, we've adapted. We've changed fundamentally. And if we're going to continue to thrive in the next 125 years, then some of the tracks that we followed to get here may not be the ones that we need to follow for where we want to go. With that in mind, your governing board has been taking a hard look at ourselves and our operations. We've been reading about modern practices that some of our peer associations have been adapting to, and we've landed on a stance that we can do better. But before we want to get into this, I want to make it clear exactly how much of this has already been decided. And here are the aspects of the proposal that you can still adjust. Everything. None of it has been decided. The board is in agreement that changes should be made, and we are recommending some of those changes based on nearly a year of talking about this, And ultimately, this comes back to you as members. If your cell phone is like mine over the past few weeks, you've likely gotten a lot of requests to text and donate and to get out and vote. And I do have a request for you, but I'm not going to text you. So if you want to get out your cell phone, you can go ahead and pull it out now. This QR code is going to take you to the form where you can provide your feedback. And I do support the proposals, and again, it is my hope that you will hear me out today and you will come and ask questions to me or any of your colleagues on the governing board. But again, I'm not going to text you directly, I promise. No text from ESA on this particular thing. This is the same information when you go to this form. It's the same one that was in your e-news. It's the same one that was emailed to you a couple weeks ago. And if you don't want to speak today or ask questions, you can always leave your feedback there directly. But if you do want to speak today, we will get to some time of that in just a little bit. So, how did we get here and why are we looking at ESA governance? Well, as I pointed out, it is the job of the governing board to think about governance. When we assumed this role, we agreed to 3 primary duties. And by the way, this is true when you join your homeowners association board, or you're joining city or local government, or you're the member of the ESA board. The first of these is the duty of care. We are responsible for using good judgment, to stay informed on the issues, to maintain confidences, and to participate. We are responsible for the duty of loyalty. It sounds self-explanatory, but in this case, it is especially pertinent to talk about that this is loyalty to the association, not to the group that may have elected us. And so as a board member, we are responsible to the entire organization, even if we happen to have had the MOVE representative following our name, or we're the student representative. Actually, we are responsible for the entire organization. And finally is the duty of obedience. We are supposed to stay aligned to the mission. We are supposed to comply with laws and regulations and to adhere to our own governing rules. As Lina highlighted, our organization has had a long history of self-examination and reflection and improvement. And over the past 130 years of this history, we have had any number of major improvements, from the big merger of the related societies back in 1953, which some of you are here for, to the renewal that has been more recent. Of these, I'll highlight a couple. I definitely remember the renewal and how much discussion that we had at that time. What I loved about what has come out of that is the alignment of our disciplines so that you're able to find folks that are doing similar work to you really easily, and I've really enjoyed being part of some of these. And I'll also admit, sometimes a little wonky when it comes to the rules, so I really did enjoy the discussion and the move to the bylaws. We had a big update to the bylaws in 2018, but that big change to our bylaws has allowed for us to have this amazing flexibility. As new things come up, ESA is able to adapt quicker while still maintaining some required practices that are very stable, like our ethics, finances, and audit committees. So you'll have seen on that we, and Lina mentioned it before, we have a strategic plan. As a reminder, in 2022, we went through the process of creating this first plan in over a decade. And it was really essential while we were still in the pandemic to help us figure out what are the priorities and what should we be focusing on. In interviews with members and with ESA staff and with volunteer leadership at the board and the sections and the branches and committees, it was clear that one element that we wanted to address was developing a better governing structure. This made its way into the plan as Objective 3A, examining governance and governance practices. And that's what we've spent the year doing. This is what that review looks like. You can see that it started really in 2021 with discussions that we could be doing things differently and that we thought that those differences would be better. In 2022, we adopted that strategic plan. December last year, we had a kickoff meeting with a consultant. In January, those consultants met and held interviews with past, current, and future leaders of the organization, and a member-led task force was created. As the consultants continued to work with that task force through the spring, we held additional information gathering meetings, and in May, there was a listening and learning session where we heard from a number of members about what we as an organization could do to improve our volunteer experience, including standardizing the roles and responsibilities across the organization. That leading each group to work independently has sometimes made it difficult to know what it is that you're supposed to be doing and what it is that you can be doing in that particular role. And so that, along with the feedback, was rolled into recommendations that the task force made to the board in June. The board met with the task force in June, and then weeks later, the board also had a full day of strategy discussions about the proposal. In September, the board agreed to the outline of the proposal and began to seek member input, and that is the emails that you have had before you. There are 3 major outcomes that we are looking to get out of this proposal, and that is to simplify the governing board structure, to elevate leaders with critical skill sets within the organization, and to enable ESA to better respond to changes that are coming to us. These 3 outcomes are going to be achieved by making 7 proposed element changes. And as I bring those forward, I'm going to invite Lina to come back to the stage to work with me, because it's been a long meeting and because this is a joint project that we need. So Lina, thank you for coming back up. We do have these 7 proposed elements, and we're going to spend some time talking about them more in depth. So these 7 elements include: reduce the overall size of the board, elect board members via non-competitive slate, select board members for knowledge and skills, not representation. The vice president would be chosen among current or recent board members. The Leadership Development Committee becomes a nominating committee to find and empower future leaders. An advisory council from the branches and sections and committees and other groups would be formed and would be key as an advisory group for the association, and to modify the bylaws so that the board is empowered to make changes going forward. So Lina, if you would please start.
Thank you. The first element is reduce board size. So there is a concept called the Ringelmann effect, which documents the impact of group size on group efficiency. Basically, the bigger the group gets, the less each member will, or each person within that group will be inclined to do something. As it relates to ESA, if we can get a smaller board of highly committed volunteers, we can build consensus more efficiently. It also translates in lower costs. We don't, as board members, we don't get money, just to make sure. But some of our expenses are covered, such as travel to the summer meetings, for example. That happens once a year. Another example, I'm sure that all of you have been in Zoom meetings during the past 4 years. So where the group size is big and some people start to turn off their cameras. Perhaps do you start to read your emails or do something else? So this is the natural consequence of meetings with many participants. And then there is the relationship part as well that you need to maintain. If you look at the right side, the relationship complexity, you will see that the 6 people, for example, will have 15 relationships to maintain. Currently, 18 group of people that we have on the governing board, there is 153 relationships to maintain. That is a lot. So even if you are sitting next to someone, it's probably better that you will have a better connection with that person and probably with the next one. So by increasing the number of people, the less you will be able to connect with them. So here is what we propose. We are recommending to remove the current structure that we have is, which one is the pointer?
The current structure is on the left.
Okay. The current structure is on the left, and you see the 5 officers that represent the presidential line plus the treasurer. You see also 10 representatives from different branches and sections, as well as career stage. We are proposing to eliminate the vice president-elect position and to transform the representation at at-large members selected based on the knowledge and skills. Again, as Jennifer said, one of the main reasons why we would like to move away from representation membership is that we would like to focus more on the skills that you can bring on the table. Yes. The second element is select for knowledge and skills, not for representation. In a lot of ways, our organization is structured similar to the US political system, where we have representatives who stand up for our interests. However, we are not a nation, but a professional society. ESA has always had a governing board and representative members. This was new to me when I joined the governing board back in 2016. As a member of the board of directors of the US corporation, I am required to represent all members, the best interests of all members of the society, not just the group that elected me or I was representing. I am required to make decisions that support the society as a whole. Fortunately, these usually align. I am supporting of the FIT initiative and also excited to work with a group of members. But if this pilot FIT program section, becomes successful and becomes a new section, how do we modify the governance to adapt to it? Where is the natural conclusion of adding a new section and then another, and then another? I talked about a minute ago, but it is also worth repeating again. The job of leading the association is to lead for all ESA. When I was a student member of the board, I did what I could do to support my student cohort and young colleagues. But I had to remember that that my loyalty is to the whole membership. That when we make decisions for all ESA. So, what kind of skills we are seeking? That's the big question, right? Some of that might be ensured that we have a diversity of aspects of our profession. Today, more than the half of ESA is a member in PI section, for example, including me. But while this is important, we need not to forget that there are other professional specialties as well. The best way to do this is to select based on skills that you can bring on the table. Can our current process do this? Probably. And in many cases it has. However, in finding future leaders, we would like to seek answers like, what is your decision-making process? What type of leadership traits do you possess? Can you delegate tasks or you like to do everything yourself? How do you resolve conflicts? Do you believe and support the ESA strategic principles? Some questions to think about.
So, as Lina pointed out, ESA is very fortunate to have so many capable and talented scientists. And a lot of us have gotten training in our workplaces to be able to do leadership. And sometimes academia also falls short on some of our kinds of training. I know when I went through, I didn't get a lot of time spent how to read a balance sheet. Those are skills that I ended up learning on my job after the fact. One of the things to remember is that ESA is a nonprofit business, but a business, a corporation, a $6 million one. And if you're running a record store, because maybe you like music like my partner does, you would make choices on who should manage your shop. Just because somebody is the foremost expert on the history of music Or maybe this person is the leading expert on a little-known group called the Beatles. You know, you wouldn't necessarily put that person in as the manager of your store. You'd want somebody that can hire people well and has good sales ability and can delegate the work responsibly. You would do an interview to pick who your manager is going to be. And that's what we're suggesting here, that our leaders for positions should be interviewed and go through a vetting process that looks very much like a job interview. The third change that we're proposing is to change the Leadership Development Committee into a nominating committee. There are several changes that this would include. That includes putting the past president on as the chair, but also having some members from the board who are not seeking election during that term, and some members at large. Their primary targets or goals each year would be twofold. One, the committee needs to work with the governing board to determine what are those skills that may be needed in a particular year. As an example, if that's a year that the board is going to be negotiating a new publishing contract, you would want to have folks in the board that have experience with publishing, whether as editors or maybe they've got experience as the business of publishing. And we don't negotiate that publishing contract every year, so that's not something that needs to be sought for a skill every year. The second main charge that they would have once they've determined what those skills are that's needed at the time is to develop those rubrics and questions so that they can interview the candidates, go out and seek those candidates, and ensure that they're being brought forward for that. So that means that this committee will need people who have experience both hiring and doing evaluations of candidates.
The fourth element that we are suggesting is move to a slate non-contested elections. On next point of the proposal, we would like to, we are moving to a list of nominees that hold the skills that we need at this point, or in any point in a specific time. This moves us away from holding a contested elections. This will work by having the Leadership Development Committee creating a list of members who already have the skills needed for the roles being filled. Members at large will be selected by the Leadership Development Committee and formally elected by members. For the 4 offices, our current or recent board service is required to become either treasurer or vice president. There you go. But what if the Leadership Development Committee misses the mark and chooses a slate that is outside of what the membership at large thinks we want or need? We are going to build then a safety net to ensure that if that is the case, the membership has a way to petition the board for a new or alternate slate. Now, I know this graphic is a little bit overwhelming, but here are what I want you to take away. Also, if you haven't yet get a chance to scan this code, this will take you to the full proposal and also to the form that we are seeking feedback from members. So please do so if you haven't done yet. Okay, going back to this graph, it is this represents a thoughtful consideration of the needs of the society at a specific point of time, and how we will choose the leaders that meet the need. Some of the critical steps that I want you to remember is we will make sure we determine and communicate the current needs of ESA. We will review the candidates against those needs, using a scoring rubric to ensure a fair process, and allowing for petition process as well. The fifth element on this proposal talks about the vice president is chosen from recent GV members. When we look back to the presidents of ESA, the proposal here is often how our elections have already worked so far. To effectively lead on the board, it really helps that you have served on the board. Since 2015 forward, we have only had 2 presidents of ESA who did not come from current or recent board service before becoming president. The 6th element is the advisory council becomes a key advisor. This is an important part that also we would like you to pay more attention. The intention is to better hear the voice. The advisory council will play a role in better to hear the voice from the members. And that comes from the membership, from branches, from sections, from the whole membership. We would like this advisory council to hear those voices in a meaningful way. The council will be flexible and therefore capable to react quickly. So ESA current structure is decentralized, as you can see in this picture. Basically, branches and sections function independently. Our committees report to the governing board, and other committees that are not shown in here report to branches and sections. We have a culture where our branches and sections make decisions with a fair amount of autonomy. They have separate budgets and investment accounts. We are not proposing to change that. We would like a strong branches and sections. But we should always be mindful that even though we have this structure, to the IRS, we are one company and one corporation. We are one ESA. So we need to have a structure that reflects that. We are proposing something that keeps the same voice of the membership, but in a more structural way. Similar to ESA's corporate structure. Now, I want to be clear that this is just an idea. The advisory council could take any other number of forms. We are strongly advising that we keep this flexible to allow for changing needs on time. For example, there might be some space on the council for some thought leaders who are not in any kind of organization leadership position. Maybe the committee report differently. What ideas do you have in how the advisory council should be formed? We would love to hear that.
All right, so this last proposal is really, it's really the wonky one. And I already told you, like, that's the part that, like, you really want to dig in with me. So I am going to breeze over this part. But essentially what is going on is that we have spent time figuring out who the best members are for the board, the ones with the experience, and having them be the ones who are responsible for the bylaws then allows for changes to be happening as they need to. We also expect then that the advisory council that Lina was highlighting is providing input to the board on those changes for the bylaws. So while it would change from the membership having the bylaws vote, that would still be a process for that to move forward. I want to highlight that this is a portion of what we've been talking about and a transition for an opportunity now for you to raise up questions you currently have. And as you do so, I remind us that today's governing board is one link in the stewardship of our organization. Each of us as board members and each of us as leaders is entrusted to make the best decisions that we can. One of those past leaders, Rob Wiedemann, is joining me to co-chair the task force that will work with all of you using the comments that you are providing as you review these proposals. We really do want your feedback. It is really important to hear what the members are thinking with this to ensure that this is the strongest set of proposals going forward. Tell us what improvements you would make. Tell us what parts are working well for you and which parts you would want to change. If you struggled with the current governance structure because you were a leader in one part and then you had no idea what you were doing when you moved to another part, tell us that. Over the next 8 months, we're going to be taking your feedback and input. There's going to be a webinar in the spring, at least one, maybe more, depending on how excited you guys are about wonky things like me. And we're obviously going to be talking about this at the branch meetings. And it is our hope that next summer that the board will make a decision on exactly what the specific changes are that they want to move forward with. And then that then again comes back to the membership for a vote in late 2025. So I'm going to throw this back up on the screen so that you can go ahead and start filling things out anonymously as you might want to. Chris has, are we quiet enough without microphones? Is that what we're doing? I have no idea how we're handling our questions. I'm so sorry. I see, we do have mics set up, which would be really helpful. We know sometimes folks will say that they don't need a microphone, but somebody in the audience always is not hearing you. So if you are comfortable asking questions, please, you see the 2 microphone stands that are set up for you. And if you don't have questions, but you want to provide feedback, I'd be happy for you to do those pieces as well. Thank you so much for staying through this. We've got about 10 to 15 minutes for questions now. Thank you.
Long walk to the mic. Thank you for making this presentation. I appreciate it. Is the intention for the advisory council to attend the governing board meetings in person?
It's a great question, Wyatt. So what would you guys think of when the advisory council should meet and how should it meet? It's not something that we've outlined as part of this.
It seems that a lot of this is driven financially with the summer governing board meeting, at least in part, and therefore I would think you wouldn't want the advisory committee to attend in person, but that's when the real fertilization of ideas happens and the ability of those people that represent their groups to connect with the few people that would become the leaders with this new model. So I think it's pretty imperative that in-person meetings with the advisory council could move the society forward, my opinion.
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, that meeting together in person is obviously one way that we're able to exchange ideas. And in my view, the advisory council could take a number of different options and rules for things, which, you know, part of that depends on what the membership would like for it. A different organization that I'm aware of, what they do for their advisory council is to bring those folks together the day before their meeting at a similar time that the governing board currently meets. And so we'd have to change some of those things. But that advisory council then meets there. One of the amazing things about that is that sometimes I read in our governing board packets that committee members don't necessarily know what other committees are doing. And so sometimes we see the same projects proposed that maybe just got done 2 years ago. And so finding a way to still allow for folks to meet together in person or to know what each other is doing, this is a great opportunity for us to build that in. I don't know that they would meet at the same time as the governing board every time, but I think that there's ways for us to build that as part of this proposal. Thanks, Wyatt.
So I had a question regarding regarding the Leadership Development Committee, and I am the incoming chair, so I'll be reaching out to you also with more questions. But how do you foresee us selecting those potential candidates in a way that is still inclusive and isn't just limited to our own networks? You know, because sometimes in ESA we see the same people over and over and over. Like, we still want to make sure that we're providing opportunities and not overlooking people with those critical skills. Do you have any thoughts?
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Michelle, for the question. That is something also that the task force currently will be working with you as well. So as you know, we get to get stronger in how we want to build and see the Leadership Development Committee, we are going to work with the task force. Do you want to add something else?
I mean, that it's another opportunity for us to develop what's working. We currently have some ways for volunteers to highlight that they're interested in things, and I'll also say, as somebody who's helped to fill out those committee rosters, sometimes it's the network. I think our Leadership Development Committee is going to have these wonderful opportunities as we go forward to see who's attending the webinars and see who's attending our programs and workshops where they're learning conflict resolution or learning about particular areas that we've decided are skills. You'll now have attendees that have completed those programs, and then that can be one way of finding those list of individuals that, hey, I've got this really cool opportunity. Would you be interested in trying this?
Hi, Lina, Jennifer, thank you. I just wanted, while we have the QR code up and soliciting input, to get some clarity as to exactly how the input will be available to members. And I understand from your earlier statement that this would be anonymous, but will members be able to see other members' input in this process?
Thanks for the question, Dawn. It is my current thought that I don't want to name, that Lina thinks this is a terrible idea and Jennifer thinks it's an amazing idea to the whole membership. We do have a task force that we're putting together, as I shared that Rob is going to be co-chairing that with me. And folks do not have to put in their names, but that group is going to go through all of those comments and anonymize that as a report back to the governing board. I don't anticipate that anybody's getting named on how they feel about a particular part or any of the portions of that.
That was part of the question. I understand anonymity, and I support that. My question was whether the members would be able to see other members' anonymized input.
Excellent. That's a great thing to think through. I anticipate the task force will provide a report to the governing board, and probably there would be a report back to that in some fashion. Chris, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Are we on? Yeah. Don, what we did last time, there was a big update, is the FAQs that you'll find on the website are going to get regularly updated based on the questions that get asked at the time. So I would expect something very similar would happen again this go around.
Hi, I like the idea of organizing all this group into a pyramid shape, top-down approach, but I worry that sometimes when that happens, there's a barrier of access, and it's become a game of telephone. By the time it reaches to the top, the idea changed completely. So I was thinking maybe there's a way to regularly or quarterly seek feedback from the member. That way, the idea and access to the top can be updated regularly, and the organization reflects the progress of the community and the idea, because, as a scientific community, we need to keep up with the progress, and science is about progress, and look at how much we changed so far for the last 5 years from AI to new thing. And if the governing board do not seek feedback regularly from the community and only the top talking to each other, that would be gatekeeping great idea.
Thank you for sharing that. So I think part of what you're sharing is a little bit of a misunderstanding of the roles of the governing board. Sometimes folks will feel, well, I can only talk to my representative, or I can only talk to my person. And what we were highlighting for you today is that even currently with this structure, Each governing board representative is responsible for each of you. So if you're in CCB, you have the full right to talk and give ideas to the PI representative or the student representative or the past president. I'm gonna walk out, you can't talk to me, I'm just kidding. So that's one area, is that each member, and we do seek feedback of those. For this particular project, as I highlighted, this is going to be open for the 8 months. And at that point, there will be a decision. And we do have a webpage that is currently being updated, as Chris pointed out, with questions and feedback that we're getting for that. You're right that there's a need for ongoing feedback on these roles. And we do, as a board, get reports and updates for things. We do annually put out charges for committees and work. A lot of that may be behind the scenes, and maybe it's not something that everybody sees or is happening, but that's been some of the work that we've had of ongoing work back and forth. And that is, hopefully why you stop me in the hall or stop one of the other board members in the hall on how to, hey, I've got this a great idea, or I'm having this issue. Sometimes we think that we have to do things through a formal setting. There's so many things that we can do in ESA without having it be formally part of the governance too. So many little networks and fun things that I've seen people put together just because they really want to have, sketchapods or insect drawing or things that don't necessarily, come before the formal structure of ESA.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. This is really helpful. So, regarding the changing of the board, the size of the board towards skill set, Jennifer said a word that I think is really important, which is experienced. And I understand that it's very important to keep the structure of the ESA and also to make sure that the rules are taken seriously. But that being said, I also think having a person, of people that are also looking towards new challenges or new things for ESA, it's important. So my question is, do you have a plan on how to reduce bias towards a lot of people have a lot of experience based on the time that they have been. And a lot of early careers take some time to develop those leaderships, not all of them. So do you have a plan on how to reduce that bias on selections?
So thank you, Lorena, for the question. And something that I want to make sure early careers especially and students understand is that we are not taking the opportunities for you to develop your professional, your leadership roles away. That's not the case. That I can assure you. What we are looking is more depending on the skills that we need in the right moment, that we have the right people to be able to take those challenges for us. So, if you are an early career and we are looking for science communication expert, you are welcome to apply. You will be in the list. If we are looking for other skills that perhaps students as well are capable to do, we are going to approach those as well. So as an early career, I can assure you that those are not the things that we are taking away. You want to add something? No? You did great.
Hi, thanks for a great presentation. It's good to hear it laid out before we start making comments and such. I just had one question about the interaction with the advisory council. That sort of structure can lead to it being lip service and ignored. So is there any discussion of a mechanism to make that more powerful, such that at least in an extreme event, the advisory council has the ability to throw it all back to the membership or something like that to say this must be dealt with beyond this closed network?
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Cynthia. Honestly, that is a huge part that is still part of what needs to be proposed. So what Lina showed you all was one version of what the advisory council could look like, but there are a number of ways that could be set up differently. And so part of what we need to hear about is how should they be decided, who should be in the room, whether it's a Zoom room or a physical room. And then what is that right reporting and interaction between the groups to make that happen? There are dozens of ways that could go, from lip service, which is not what we want, to areas that potentially could be much more collaborative and innovative than what we currently have. I know that's where we're wanting to go, but I also do want to make sure that members know that this is a great place for us to figure out, what are the pieces that you think are really important and make sure that that's what we build into this. So I don't have it's a reason why it's maybe feeling a little more squishy is because it is a great place for us to put that input and make sure that we're building the right one in this proposal.
Hi, I wanted to ask a follow-up to Lorena's question. I believe one of the benefits of having students and early career professionals on the governing board is not so much that they have the experiences that might lead them to be chosen for the proposed board, but because they do have those perspectives of the early career professionals that those with experience might not have memory of because it has been some time since they were in our perspective. So are you seeing more of the perspective or the role of students in the advisory board?
So I would say that there would still be room for a student or multiple students to be on the governing board directly as well. One example is our current chair or our outgoing chair of the Leadership Development Committee, because Michelle just highlighted that she's the incoming chair. Our outgoing chair of that committee is a student, Deshae Dillard. And that is an example of somebody who has an amazing skill set that was right and was needed for the committee to do that leadership. And as Lina's pointing out, there are going to be times where that particular skill set that a student has, they're going to be stronger and be the right folks for it. I do think that they will have an important place in the advisory council as well, and it may be what it currently looks like of one student. It may be multiple students. It may be all sorts of different ways. I think the other thing I would highlight for students, if you happen to still be in the room right now, because I sometimes hear this, like I can only be the student representative thing. The only thing that you can't be is the president. You can run for every single other opening that we have, your section representative or any committee position that you like. And that's not something that we're currently looking at changing. We might still suggest not being president just because it is a little bit of work, just the tiniest bit. And maybe you should be getting your degree done, like that might be it, but that's the only thing that I'm seeing for that part. It looks like you have some additional questions to go with that.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, I just wanted to, it's a little hard to see, so I wasn't sure. Thank you. Well, again, thank you so much for staying and paying attention and all the feedback that you already have. And obviously, we're looking forward to more feedback. The best way to make sure that it gets in front of the task force is to get it into the form. I really appreciate you using that. I just apologize. My brain is Swiss cheese, so talking to me about it is not going to get it into that form. So if you can, I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your day here in Phoenix, and I so look forward to seeing you in Portland in 2025. Thank you, everyone.